The coffee was still warm when Margot heard Joel's voice come through the truck speakers. She had not meant to listen. Her right hearing aid had been whistling softly for the last hour of the drive, a thin, insistent frequency that cut through everything, and she had taken it out to adjust it. When she pressed it back into place, she felt the familiar vibration of it reconnecting to the truck's Bluetooth. She assumed it had paired to the playlist they had been running since Raleigh. Instead, she heard Joel. He was standing just outside the passenger window, maybe 12 feet away, his back to the windshield. His coffee was in one hand and his phone was to his ear. The truck's microphone picked him up without difficulty. She would think about that detail for a long time afterward, how clearly it carried. Margot had been 28 when she woke one morning and noticed the silence on her left side. Not a complete silence, a muffled one, like someone had pressed a heavy curtain against that ear while she slept and hadn't removed it by morning. She had been sick the week before, a bad respiratory infection that dragged on, and she assumed it was fluid pressure, something temporary. She waited 3 days. It didn't lift. The audiologist showed her the results the way a doctor might show you an X-ray of a broken bone. Here is what's missing. Here is what remains. Most of the hearing in her left ear was gone. Her right ear had some loss too, though less severe. With hearing aids in both, she could follow conversation in quiet rooms. In restaurants, she watched people's mouths. On the phone, she used captions. Music, which she had loved without qualification her whole life, became something different, flatter, the way a photograph is of a place you once stood. You can see the outline of it. The color is something you remember from before. She had worked as a music transcriptionist before the loss. She sat for hours with headphones on, translating recordings into written notation for composers and small publishers. She kept doing the work afterward, but slowly, replaying passages 6 and 8 and 10 times to catch what she'd missed. Her employer didn't know for almost a year. When she finally told them, they had been kind but watchful, in a way that made her feel like something fragile being handled carefully by people who were afraid of breaking it. She adjusted. The way you do with things that don't go away, you adjust. She learned to sit facing the entrance in restaurants. She told new people early, before it became a thing they discovered on their own, and then didn't know how to acknowledge. She stopped going to loud concerts, to crowded parties, to any room where she had to perform the effort of hearing at full capacity for hours. She developed a small, specific grief about all of it, and mostly didn't look at it directly. She met Joel at a farmer's market in Durham on a Saturday in early March. He was at a honey stand arguing cheerfully with the vendor about whether a particular wildflower variety tasted of anything specific. Margot had been waiting beside him for jam, and when he turned to pull her into the argument the way people sometimes do with nearby strangers, she had to ask him to repeat himself. She touched her ear. "Sorry, hearing aids. Could you say that again?" He repeated himself. Same pace, same volume. No performance of patience, no over-enunciation, no brief, uncomfortable pause while he recalibrated. Just said the thing again as if it were completely ordinary. Which it was, she knew that. But she had grown accustomed to the pause. They got coffee. They talked for 2 hours. He asked good questions and listened to the answers, and when she described her transcription work, he asked what it was like to work with music she could only partially hear. She said it was like reading a letter written in handwriting. You could mostly but not fully make out. You read toward the meaning and sometimes you guessed, and sometimes you were wrong, but you kept reading. He said that was an interesting way to live, and he meant it as a compliment. She thought about him for 3 days after that. They dated for 7 months before she invited him into her apartment, and he saw how she had arranged things. The captioning always on, the flashing doorbell, the amplified phone beside the bed. He didn't comment on any of it. At the time she thought that was the right response. Later she understood it differently. He hadn't commented because he had already begun, quietly, cataloging it. He was attentive. He texted more than he called. He chose quieter restaurants. When they went to the movies, he confirmed the caption glasses before they arrived. He learned the specific geography of her daily navigation, the way you learn someone's coffee order, automatically, without being asked, which feels like love and also like being known, and which can sometimes be, she would come to understand, its own kind of erasure. She loved him. She waited longer than usual to say it, because she was careful with herself in that way. But she did. The sheet music had been his idea, though he hadn't told her he was looking for it. She had mentioned once, months in, that there was a composer she had been fixed on in her early 20s, a lesser-known Bulgarian-American who had written a series of piano suites. Her college music theory professor had given her a hand-annotated score of the first three when she graduated, a gift she had kept through every move since. But the fourth suite, the final one, had been published separately, and she had never been able to locate it. Out of print, rare, something she had searched for half-heartedly and then let go of. Joel spent 3 weeks tracking it down. He didn't mention he was looking. He just arrived one evening, with it inside a padded envelope, and set it on her kitchen table while she was making dinner. She didn't understand what it was at first. Then she saw the notation on the first page and her hands went still. "Where did you find this?" "Library sale up in Greensboro." Took a while to confirm it was the right edition. She held the booklet without opening it further. The pages were yellowed at the edges, and someone had written in pencil in the margins, lightly, with thought. She ran her thumb along the spine. She had not cried in front of Joel before that evening, but she did then, briefly, and he found somewhere else to look, which was exactly right. She read every page after he left. The fourth suite was everything she had wanted it to be. Every phrase resolved the way she had hoped across years of not knowing. They moved in together in September. Joel had an apartment in Raleigh. Margot kept her Durham place for 2 months as a precaution she never quite admitted to herself, then gave it up and brought her things across. The first months were careful and good. They divided the household without discussion, the way new couples do when they are still trying to please each other. He cooked on weeknights. She tracked the bills. He was patient and funny, and he left her alone when she was working, which mattered. But he had a habit she noticed gradually, the way you notice a drip, one instance at a time, until you hear it constantly. He made decisions for her without asking. Small ones at first. Declining a group dinner because it would be too loud, mentioning it afterward as a thing already done. Telling his friend they'd skip the outdoor concert series, because Margot doesn't really do concerts anymore. Choosing a hotel on a weekend trip that was listed as quiet and secluded, which would have been considerate if he had told her he was looking, but which arrived as a confirmed booking, a choice already made on her behalf. She told herself he was being thoughtful. She told herself she was ungrateful. Once, his mother called about a family reunion at an outdoor venue with a bluegrass band. Joel told her they probably couldn't make it. He hadn't asked Margot. When she found out, she said she would have liked to go, that she could manage outdoor events if she stayed away from the speakers. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully read. "I just didn't think you'd want to deal with it." "It's a lake," she said. "I like lakes." He apologized. They went to a different gathering 3 months later, and it was fine. But Margot sat beside him at the dinner table that night, and felt, without being able to name it precisely, that she was slowly becoming a condition rather than a person. She kept working, kept taking transcription assignments, started doing remote audio description for a company that captioned independent films. She was building something, steadily and on her own terms, and that mattered. But there were evenings when Joel came home and didn't ask about her day, and she realized she had been telling her friend Corinna about the work instead, on the phone, while Joel watched something in the next room. Corinna had been her friend since college. She lived in Charlotte and drove up when she could. When Margot described the reunion incident, Corinna listened all the way through. "Does he know you're bothered?" "I told him." "What did he say?" "He apologized." Corinna said nothing else. Before she drove back to Charlotte, she hugged Margot at the door 1 beat longer than usual. The accessible concert had been Margot's plan. A symphony program in Charlotte at an auditorium with a designated assistive listening section, calibrated for hearing aid users. She had bookmarked the page months before, checked it twice, and finally bought 2 tickets when she had saved enough. She told Joel the same evening. She was more genuinely excited about it than she had let herself be about anything music-related in years. He said it sounded great. He put it in his calendar. 3 weeks later, over dinner, he mentioned that his friend Wade had planned a long weekend cabin trip. The dates overlapped exactly with the concert. "I already bought the tickets," Margot said. He looked at his phone. He had not checked. He apologized, said it had gotten buried, offered to back out of the trip. Margot told him to go. He said he felt terrible. She said it was fine. She called Corinna that night. Corinna drove up from Charlotte, and they went together. They sat in the assistive listening section near the left aisle, and the string section was clearer than Margot had heard strings in 4 years. There was a moment in the second movement when she closed her eyes, and felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known was held tight. She cried a little, just briefly, and Corinna pretended not to notice and then said quietly, "Take your time." And that was all. Joel asked about it when she got home. She said it was beautiful. He said he was glad. He asked if she was hungry. They were careful with each other for a few days after that. Then things went back to normal, and that was its own kind of answer. She met his parents in the original plan for August, which got pushed to November due to his work schedule. By then, she had been living with Joel for 14 months. The drive to Wilmington was easy in the early miles. She wore her blue dress and her good earrings, and when he came to pick her up, he said she looked great. And for a while, the highway felt like the beginning of something, rather than the middle of something running out. About 90 minutes in, her right hearing aid began whistling. The fit had shifted slightly. She took it out, adjusted it with her thumbnail, and held it in her palm. Joel pulled into a rest stop for gas and went inside. She sat in the passenger seat looking at the overcast sky. She reseated the hearing aid and pressed it in. The truck speakers came on, not music, Joel's voice. He was on the far side of the truck, partially visible in the passenger mirror. His phone was to his ear. The Bluetooth had paired when her device reconnected, and the truck's microphone was picking him up through the open window. She did not move. "I don't know, Ryan." His voice was low, the voice he used when he thought no one was listening. "I really don't." His brother Ryan said something she couldn't fully catch. "I love her, that's not the question." A pause, whined against the microphone. "But I think about the next 10 years and I genuinely don't know if I'm built for it. Every trip is a research project. Every event, every restaurant I'm calling ahead, checking accessibility, managing the sound levels, watching to make sure she's following the conversation. I do it because I want to. But it never stops. And I feel like I can't say any of this. Because then I'm the person who couldn't handle it." Ryan's voice lower then. "So what are you doing?" Joel didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said. "I honestly don't know." She looked at his face in the side mirror. He turned toward the truck and saw the dashboard screen, the Bluetooth indicator, the call timer, her device paired and active. He ended the call. He came back and opened the driver's door and set a coffee in the cup holder. "Hey, you okay?" She looked at him. His eyes moved to the dashboard screen and then away. "Fine," she said. He started the engine. The navigation picked up the route. Margot reached over and turned the screen off. "Don't take me to your parents' house," she said. "I want to see the ocean." Joel's hands closed on the steering wheel. He didn't ask her to explain. After a moment, he changed lanes toward the coast. Wrightsville Beach was empty in November. The parking lot held 2 other cars, and the wind came straight off the water. They walked to the low concrete barrier at the dune line, and she sat on it and looked at the ocean. It was wider than photographs made it look. Not the distance, she knew the scale, but the way it moved, continuous, without pause or interruption. She watched it for a long time. Joel sat beside her and was quiet, and she was grateful for that much. Eventually she said, "I heard you on the phone." He let out a slow breath. "I know." The wind moved across the sand. Down the beach, a dog ran after something thrown by a child running after the dog. "I don't blame you for feeling what you feel," she said. "I want to say that first. Margot. But I can't stay with someone who is already calculating how long they can manage me." She kept her voice even. It was easier than she had expected. Maybe because she had been half preparing for this, without knowing it, for months. "I'm not something to be managed." "That's not what I said." "I know it's not what you said to me. It's what you said to your brother." He didn't answer. She opened her bag and took out the sheet music booklet. The 4th suite, the yellowed pages, the penciled margins. She had carried it with her since the day he gave it to her. She placed it in his hands. "I finished it," she said. "Thank you for finding it. It was everything I hoped." He looked at the booklet. "Please keep it. You worked hard for it. Keep it." He set it on the barrier between them. Neither of them picked it up. They stayed at the beach for another hour. The conversation didn't turn angry or sharp. Things between them rarely had, and that was something she had once thought of as gentleness. Now she understood it differently. There had simply never been enough turbulence to clear the air. He drove her home. She got out at the door. He started to say something and she shook her head, not sharply, just, "Not now." She went inside and sat in the kitchen for a long time. The first few weeks were exactly the gray she had expected. She woke up and his coffee mug wasn't on the counter and she didn't look at that space for too long. She kept working. Corinna called every few days and didn't press. Margot was honest with her, that she was sad and that she also felt something close to relief, and that she couldn't fully explain how both were true at once. She applied for a grant through a Disability Arts Foundation to develop a digital archive of accessible music scores, a project she had been postponing for 2 years, telling herself she'd do it when things settled. Things had never settled. She submitted the application on a Tuesday morning and went back to work. She made an appointment with an audiologist she had been putting off. She was fitted for a newer pair of hearing aids, smaller, with better Bluetooth integration, and a sharper response in the upper frequencies. The first time she put them in and walked outside, she heard a bird she hadn't caught in years and stopped on the sidewalk and laughed, briefly, because it was almost too much. The grant came through in March. She bought a single ticket to a string quartet program in Charlotte, a small, intimate venue with assistive listening in the rear section. She went alone. She sat with her good coat on and the program in her lap, and when the music started, she watched the player's hands instead of closing her eyes, the bow arms, the way the violist leaned into a phrase. She stayed for the full program. She drove home in the dark, feeling something that wasn't quite happiness, but was very near it. The specific satisfaction of being exactly where she had decided to be. The ocean came a few months later. Corinna drove with her to the Outer Banks in May. They rented a small place and Margot went to the water alone before sunrise, while the sky was still dark. She sat close enough that each wave reached the sand a few feet from her chair. She watched the light change, black to gray to the pale orange that came before the sun. And she watched the ocean through all of it. The same water she had sat beside in November, the same width and continuous movement. This time, there was no one beside her being silent in a way that held its own weight. There was only the water and the low percussion of each wave, clearer in these new hearing aids, more present than she remembered. She stayed until the sun was fully up. Then she went back to the rental and made coffee, and waited for Corinna to wake up. The third thing took the longest. She had danced before her hearing changed, not professionally, just for the love of it, a salsa class on Sunday evenings she had attended for 4 years because it was music and movement at once, both things together. She had stopped when her hearing shifted. She told herself she'd be off the beat, too visible, that the rhythm wouldn't reach her the same way. She found a studio in Raleigh that had worked with deaf and hard of hearing dancers. The instructor didn't make it into something significant. She explained that they used floor vibration speakers in addition to the sound system, that rhythm could be felt before it was heard. She said it the way you explain anything practical. Margot went on a Wednesday evening. She stood near the back of the room and felt the bass frequency rise through the floor before the melody registered in her ears, and something in her body recognized it. The beat arriving first in her feet, in her knees, before her hearing aids had fully processed the sound. She was off the count on the first song. She was on it by the third. She went back the following week, and the week after that. She ran into Joel once, at the same farmer's market in Durham, in October. Nearly a year after the drive to Wilmington, he was at the honey stand. She thought that was too precise, and then she thought that was simply how things were sometimes. He saw her first and waved. She waved back. They talked for a few minutes, careful and ordinary, the way people do when they used to know each other's sleep schedules and now meet in public with the volume turned down. He asked how she was. She said well. She meant it. He looked like he had been working hard and not sleeping enough. She said he looked good and believed the first part at least. They went in different directions. Walking home, she thought about him without pain. Exactly. More the way you think about a place you used to live when you pass it on a different street. Recognition, and then the ordinary present, and then you are somewhere else, and that is fine. The sheet music booklet had stayed on her kitchen counter for about 2 weeks after he drove her home. Then she put it on the shelf with her other scores. She read the fourth suite again once, tracing the penciled annotations someone else had left in the margins decades ago, someone who had thought differently about a phrase than she did. She had her own pencil now. She wrote her own notes in the spaces beside theirs. Her transcription work had become more stable. The grant project was taking shape, a searchable database of accessible scores with audio descriptions, designed for musicians with partial hearing loss. She had been contacted by 2 music schools about piloting it. She kept her careful notebooks, kept her scheduled hours, kept the work moving forward in small, specific increments. Corinna came for Thanksgiving, and they cooked too much and ate at the kitchen table until the conversation wound down into comfortable silence. Margot played a recording from the dance studio's page, a Sunday session, the whole class moving together, and Corinna watched it without saying anything sentimental. "Look at you," Corinna said. Margot knew what she meant. She did not think of herself as someone who had been failed, though she had been. She did not think of herself as someone who had recovered, though that had also happened. She thought of herself as someone who had needed to find out what she was capable of when no one was standing behind her doing the planning, and who had learned that the answer was more than she had assumed it would be. The music she worked with every day was full of incomplete scores, missing movements, sections lost to time or circumstance, or a flood in someone's archive. She spent her days listening for what was absent and documenting what remained. She had learned that a piece could be worth everything, even when it wasn't whole, that you could love it across the gap, that finding what was missing, even years late, even without anyone beside you, was worth every hour of looking. She was still looking for the next thing and the one after that. That, she had decided, was enough. For now, it was everything.